Okay, so to talk more about what is and might be happening on the Strait, I want to bring in international maritime law expert Ian Ralby. He is the president of Oxlium Worldwide, a nonprofit organization focused on ocean governance and maritime security. Ian, I think you're a good voice on this one. Can you help us straighten out sort of what is happening, on the Strait of Hormuz? We've got Donald Trump saying that the U.S. blockade is going to remain in full force. Hearing something very different from Iran as to whether that's okay.
Well, I think there is an enormous difference between what we're hearing from both Washington and Iran and what is actually happening on the water. There are three issues. Number one, the Iranian opening of the Strait of Hormuz is not actually opening in the way that we would normally expect those words to mean. In other words, they have said that in order for a vessel to transit, they have to first get permission from Iran, and specifically from the IRGC, which is a designated terrorist organization. Then they have to proceed with that permission through a transit corridor designated by Iran that brings the vessel very, very close to the Iranian coast on either side of Larak Island. That does not sound like an open strait under normal circumstances. Additionally, we also have the concerns around both the mines that may or may not exist in the water and other security aspects of the volatility of the situation. Iran may resume attacking ships at any moment if they are either dissatisfied with what is occurring, or if, as we just heard, the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, which has nothing to do with the immediate vicinity of the strait, resumes. And so that's a very precarious position for the seafarers to be in. And finally, the U.S. blockade is still in place. And what the Americans do both immediately to prevent ships from leaving Iran, as well as chasing after ships that may have Iranian affiliated cargoes, mean that this is not an open movement of maritime commerce at the moment.
I want to pick up, I think I was on point 2. You talked about this specific corridor very close to the coastline of what is Iran, that being the only area that a ship that gets permission is allowed to travel in. Might that be because, what are the concerns? The concern about being in that particular bed of water would be the proximity to Iran, and that could possibly be risky?
Well, I think there's a risk, but there's also a clear desire by Iran to maintain its chokehold on this choke point. There is no way that the Iranians, after having developed such an incredible amount of leverage over not only the United States and Israel, but the entire world, are going to cede that in advance of negotiations. So this is an optics battle more than it is a change in the reality and the circumstances on the water. In fact, today, many ships started moving towards that point and were actually turned back for lack of permission from Iran. And so this is not open transit. This is not freedom of navigation as is prescribed by international law. And this is still a very precarious situation with a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, well, that was sort of gets me to my next question, which was how many ships actually, or do you have a handle on how many have actually made it through?
Bizarrely, a cruise ship seems to have gotten through via a very unusual route today, but that seems to be an anomaly. The commercial vessels, the ones that are carrying not only the oil and gas products, but the goods that need to go both in and out of the Gulf, have not been getting through. And so we see at most a very minimal trickle, but nothing approaching even a small percentage of the 130 to 150 ships that were coming through on the 27th of February. So we are far from that basic level of operation, and we are not going to see a resumption of that level for quite a while, no matter what happens, because there have been so many differences in terms of what has changed between the beginning of March and now in terms of infrastructure. So there's a lot of work to be done to get maritime traffic back up to running speed.
I was going to say, do you think that the open Strait of Hormuz will remain open? But from what you're saying, you don't feel that it's in any way really open at this point.
No.
Despite, may I say, the market reaction to news that it was open. There's been a huge positive response, I guess, just to the verbal assurances that this was happening. But what do you predict what's going to happen moving forward if, in fact, there is, a prolonged negotiation here that continues?
Absolutely. I think one of the problems is that the entirety of the situation has been replete with information operations, where war of words has been as important as the actual war itself. And the markets have actually responded much more to the words than some of the reality, because the reality has been hard to assess. But for the seafarers, the men and women who actually carry our goods, their reality is very bleak at the moment, not so comfortable and very dangerous. And we have to keep in mind that all of those goods, all of that economic activity is actually brought by actual human beings whose lives are at risk. And so that needs to be kept in mind. But same time, the markets seem to be more responsive to tweets and statements by the president of the United States than they do to the intelligence and information that's coming out of the area. But reality will at some point come into a crash course with this whole situation, because there's no way that the lack of flow of oil and gas out of the region won't continue to affect both the price of oil and its available supply for particularly Asian markets, as well as jet fuel supplies in Europe and elsewhere. So there's a long process right now of untangling the rhetoric and the reality that needs to occur in order to get to some degree of stability. But I suspect Monday will be once again a bit manic, though hopefully we can actually see real movement towards a negotiation that might actually simmer down this conflict and de-escalate both the actual physical conflict as well as the extremely volatile rhetoric that's gone back and forth and has reached a fevered pitch at times, speaking in terms that are downright apocalyptic.
I don't know if you're a betting man, but if you had to guess based on how things have gone, do you see a quick timeline to the end of this?
Not at all. And I think there are a couple of reasons why that timeline is bad. Number one, the parties are very volatile. They're both mercurial. There's a lot of uncertainty. And what we've now seen is Iran successfully tying what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz to what's happening in Israel's neighborhood. And that is a real concern given Israel's history of re-escalating conflict when it sees fit to do so, without regard to necessarily what's happening elsewhere or what others might need. And so that puts a three-dimensional piece to this that is not good news for the world's economy. But at the same time, even if everything opened up, all the minds were clear, the US and Iran said we're now best friends, it would not be a complete resumption, because we've seen damage to the infrastructure needed to make that maritime commerce flow, and it will be years before all of that is back up and running. And so until we have both clear peace, clear, comfortable, and stable conditions on the water, as well as the ability to resume the work on the engineering that allows for all of this economic activity to occur, we're going to be stuck in a long-term situation here.
Ian Ralby is an international maritime law expert and president of Auxilium Worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you so much.